สวัสดีเจ้า I'm Pim Kemasingki, editor of Citylife Chiang Mai, and I'm back at my daybed today with yet another super special guest, Rebecca Weldon. So, if you've been in Chiang Mai, and of course Tiggy,
Yes, hello there.
no, not the bottom. So, if you've been for Chiang Mai for any length of time, you've probably seen Rebecca in this, looking exactly like this, same outfit, same hairstyle, wandering around the streets because you walk a lot, don't you?
I do walk,
Yeah.
yes.
And if you've been here for longer in this region, you probably would have met her in Chiang Rai since the what, 70s, 80s?
Early 80s.
Early 80s. She founded the first guest house
That's
in
right.
Chiang Rai called the Golden Triangle, where my family used to stay in all the time. So I was a wee lass when I was running around your guest house. So we're going to talk today about Rebecca's pretty damn remarkable life. I mean, for instance, she speaks Samoan, of all things.
Uh-oh.
So that's just a little vignette. But, and then we're going to focus on what she's been doing in Chiang Rai and how you've been part of this sort of Chiang Rai renaissance that's emerged in the last few decades. So, Rebecca, you know you best. So, I should hope so. Can you maybe give us a brief rundown of your background, your very exotic background?
I would say a little bit exotic. You don't expect finding people from, how can I say, the Bayou country in Louisiana wandering around the world. And, but I was very fortunate in the sense that my parents, who were both doctors, got interested in finding all the other diseases that were like the ones that they grew up with
Oh, that was
around
that the
the world. Yes.
Oh.
So the first place we went was Samoa. And then we went on to Laos, and they went
So
on
what
to
great
work.
diseases did they discover in these places?
Well, Mom was a specialist in tropical medicine and had studied parasitology, but also malaria, expert in malaria and things like
all the
that.
nasty stuff.
And then Dad was a pediatrician, so he was quite concerned with nutrition.
Yeah.
And of course, making sure that, kids did well and got vaccinated.
So what was it like growing up in Samoa and Laos in the, I'm not going to tell what decade,
We
a
first
few years back?
we first left when I was only 7 years old, so that was in the 60s. And it was, how can I say, the memories are wonderful
Yeah, yeah.
because the places we went were beautiful.
But it must have been so raw and so...
Well, it was and it wasn't. One of the wonderful things about Samoa, in fact, was being on the water. We had a bayou in the little town we lived in Louisiana. It was called Maringouin,
Yeah, yeah.
which means mosquito in
Oh.
French. But to actually see boats moving on the water in the ocean in Samoa and all the fishing boats coming in and out of the harbor,
Must have been wonderful.
and all the different people from fishermen from all the different places coming in and coming out, going out was wonderful.
So how long were you in Laos for?
We were in Laos for 12 years.
That must have been pretty
Yes,
special.
we went there in 1973, not quite 12 years. They left in late 74, almost 12 years.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a long time. About half that time, I was living all the time in Laos, and then the other half I was studying overseas, elsewhere. And,
Where?
well, after growing up in Laos, my mom decided I wasn't very American. So
You sound pretty American.
so I was sent to stay with family in the U.S. for a year in Texas, of all places.
Oh.
And it was wonderful, actually, being with family,
Yeah.
with my father's older sister and my cousins. But since I had done my studies in French in Laos,
Of course.
Dad being a pediatrician, he liked to encourage us in our interests. And
Yeah.
so I was the only American in the French lycée in Vientiane. The decision was made for me to continue my studies in French. So I
Right.
went to boarding school in Europe. And
Ah.
first in Switzerland, and then later on continuing my studies in
snap.
French. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so then, right, let's continue the journey.
Uh-oh.
So then you studied what?
Let's see, what did I study? Well, from the very beginning, I loved the poetics of memory
Ooh.
because I was always moving around different places and I had all of these wonderful memories and wonderful stories. And from the time I was small, I would write. And so I would spend my time writing and also reading a lot of literature and wondering how the literature connected with the places I lived. And for instance, when I saw the boats coming in and out of the harbor in Samoa, I said, I wonder where all of those boats come from and who they are. And she gave me a copy of the Iliad to read.
Wow,
So,
yeah, beautiful. Wow, yeah.
So from the time I was young, I've always loved literature.
Yeah.
So my first area of study was actually French literature, and particularly I liked poetry, and then went on to study what do they call it? Oriental linguistics,
Oh, okay.
philology,
Oh, wow.
in Belgium.
Oof, that's a tough one.
Yes, it was tough, and it wasn't. Linguistics was not really my thing.
I hated linguistics.
I liked being out talking
Yeah,
to people
it
rather
was
than
so-
sitting in a classroom.
oof.
So,
I struggled with that.
and then later anthropology, which
A
allowed
lot more
me to,
exotic.
yes, allowed me to get out of the classroom.
Bit like being a journalist, you get to be nosy. Being an
Right,
anthropologist.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So tell me, so then you came to Thailand and you met your husband. Or, is it, or
Yes.
am I skipping a bit?
Well, I first went to Haiti, of all
Oh.
places.
Okay.
After I finished my studies, I went down to Haiti on vacation. And then because I like talking Haitian Creole, they offered me a job. I worked for CARE down there. And that is where I was able to focus on my interest in material culture, what things people make, and got very much involved in organizing cooperatives for the production of handicrafts and
okay.
things like that
Oh.
to bring in income in the villages in Haiti. And then later on, I went actually back to the United States because I'd never spent any time there.
Well, you had your 1 year.
I had my
Texas.
1 year, yes,
Yep.
and decided I'd spend time writing. So I went to first back to Louisiana and then to Washington, D.C. And when I was in Washington, I was writing a lot of poetry, but wasn't making any money.
Poets rarely do.
So I found a job that paid very well,
Which
becoming a
was?
carpenter.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that at all. Okay, let me feel your hands.
Yes.
Worn off a bit.
Yeah. And my grandfather on my mother's side was a carpenter.
Oh.
And whenever we visited family, I liked to hang out with him. And Dad's hobby, my father's hobby, was making furniture.
There you go.
So I had been, working that way. And you made
Yeah.
a lot more money as a carpenter than waiting
poet.
on tables.
Well, oh, okay.
So, and I could choose my work
Yeah.
over time, which was great. So when I was writing a lot, maybe I would say, okay, I finished this job, I'll wait for the next one and, write for a while and then go to work on a different job. And then I came back here.
Yeah. So what brought you back here?
How can I put it? I'd always wanted to come back, but I couldn't go to Laos because my parents had worked with the State Department and they weren't after, the communists took over, they weren't looking forward to having members of families. So I was offered, because somebody had heard about my work in Haiti with the handicraft cooperatives, I was offered a job with Catholic Relief Services in the Affected Thai Villages program
Where was that?
in Isan. And these were Thai villages who were not receiving the same level of help as refugees
Oh, really?
from Indochina. And so the complaint was that, okay, you're taking care of all these foreigners, but you're not taking care of us.
Right.
So a project was developed to help develop income and sustainability for Thai villages in
Was
that
it
area.
during the Isan Hill era when they were just beginning to go back into Isan and try and green it up and bring it out of
Yes.
poverty?
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. So I helped to develop handicraft cooperatives
Yeah.
and buffalo banks.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I like
remember.
buffalo.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, buffaloes are great. And in Laos, I had had a lot of fun because I like to speak Lao. I had lots of friends. We used to go out and plant rice, and of course, I knew buffaloes.
Well, you look like you just come straight out of
Uh-oh.
a paddy field.
And yeah, it was always fun.
Yeah.
And so doing that, and then as I was working on that, I was introduced to my love of my life, who was not working in rice fields or out in the villages. He was
Thai
working
Airways.
Thai International.
Oh, Thai International.
Thai International. How can I say?
Love.
Yes, lightning struck both of us, and that was it.
That was it. And he was from Chiang Rai.
He was from Chiang Rai. His grandfather was a descendant of a French colonial official in Laos who came to work with the teak logging concession in Chiang Rai and met his wife there. He had gone on to do his studies in Bangkok and then in New Zealand,
Oh.
worked for Air New Zealand. And his grandfather had been director of Air Laos
Oh.
after independence in Laos.
Right, right.
And his mother had founded the first travel agency in Vientiane
Huh.
and had moved to Vientiane from Chiang Rai, established first travel agency. So he was third generation travel.
Yes. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And went into Thai International.
Yeah. So why did you decide to move to Chiang Rai, and when?
Well, it was quite interesting because it was an area that was very attractive for those of us who knew Laos and had worked there and grown up there. And my father was retiring, and he had remarried a Thai woman who was also a friend of my husband's mother.
Oh. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
I mean, that's how the connection.
Wow.
And they were looking for a piece of property up in Chiang Rai.
Yeah.
And so I went up to help look for the property and drove up to Chiang Rai.
So what was the plan? Were you going to go there to retire? What was the plan to go there?
Well, the plan was
And
originally.
when was this again?
This was in 1983.
Okay.
And I had been working in Nong Khai, based in Nong Khai. And I went up there with my future husband, June. We drove up there and we're looking at a number of different places. And just because we happened to be up there together, our relationship developed. So I was not only helping my father, who was still working overseas at that point, look for a piece of property,
Right.
but also getting to know him. So it just seemed like Chiang Rai had become home.
So, okay, which brings us to something I really, really want to talk to you about. And I've already interviewed you once about this before in Chiang Mai Citylife. Well, this is Citylife, just not the magazine. But I want to talk about what world did you arrive into Chiang Rai and eventually how you left it and what part you had in the creation of what Chiang Rai is today. It's a lot, but we can slowly go through it. So tell me, what was it Chiang Rai like when you first landed there in '83? And then what did you create?
Chiang Rai was a prosperous but small town. It was right on the trading network. People were coming from all over the place, coming to the market in Chiang Rai. So for me, Chiang Rai was fascinating. It had so many people from so many different places. And it was wonderful to be able to meet everybody there. But it was also
So what do
a
you mean
town.
by so many people from so many places? Where? Who? What were they
People
doing?
from up in the hills, but also travelers from across the borders.
Yeah.
And also people who had come from the bordering countries and established themselves there for commercial reasons,
Right.
for the most part.
Yeah.
and were second generation
And there was a fair few amount of
descendants.
expat researchers and quite interesting anthropologists and researchers at that time, the 80s?
Not very
not
many.
there. Oh, they
not
were
very
here.
many. They would go to Chiang Rai, but they were based here in
Yeah,
Chiang Rai,
right,
in Chiang
right,
Mai.
right. Oh, fun fact, talk about interesting people coming to Chiang Rai. I found out a few years ago that pre-COVID at least, 40 North Koreans cross the border into Chiang Rai from China every year. Fun fact. Anyway, back to you.
So what was interesting was that particularly for me, having done my studies in French and been interested in the French exploration of the area and learning more about the background of relationship between people in the region, having grown up in a place that was always called the Golden Triangle,
Yes, very exotic.
but everyone thinking that it only had to do with drugs was a very interesting
Wasn't
thing
it?
for me. Well, of course it did. But on the other hand, trading had been going on in the Golden Triangle. And grandfather, who had been there since the 1920s, he first came there, he said even back in those days it was called the Golden Triangle before the drug trade had developed.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I never knew that. What? But who called it? What would it have been in สามเหลี่ยม ทองคำ?
And the
Really?
Triangle d'Or
Really?
in French. So he said even then people were referring it to the Golden Triangle because it was where people came together to do commerce.
I did not know that.
It was the exchange point, and Chiang Rai played a very important part in it. But it had become, how can you say, subsidiary to Chiang Mai, and
Yeah.
now Chiang Mai is known as a big center for that time. But in fact, it was the first place where everybody crossed
Yes.
and connected
Of course. Yeah.
was in Chiang Rai. And so for him, it was a fascinating place, and we would walk around town when I first moved there. We would walk around town, and he would tell me the stories of each family and all the different shops as we walked
wow.
around town and we walked around the markets because he had known these people for generations.
Yeah.
And so it was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And as an anthropologist, but also just in general,
Yeah.
the how can I say, the poetic aspects of memory.
There we go. So you then, Golden Triangle,
Yes.
set up the first guest house, which was called
The Golden Triangle.
the Golden Triangle. Cunning name. And yes, and I used to stay there as a child. And so it became this extraordinary meeting place, didn't it? I mean, I don't have many memories because I was a bit young, but I do remember sort of going in there and just my parents would meet people. They would bump into people. There'd be an author. There'd be a historian. There'd be there'd be really interesting people that came through that place. So tell us a little bit about what you created.
So how it started was quite interesting. We started with the cafe, the restaurant. And what
Coffee
it did,
in those
well, we
days.
called it the Golden Triangle Cafe, of
Did you
course,
have real
on the
coffee?
French side. Of course we had coffee.
Oh, we didn't in Chiang Mai.
But of course, at that point, it was mostly imported.
Oh.
Anyway, but we called it cafe because June's great-grandfather was the one who brought coffee to southern Laos.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
Yes.
Now
So-
that madam with the Versailles building in Pak Se, she's the biggest
Yes.
obnoxious building.
So the first coffee that was planted on the Boulevards Plateau actually was brought by him back at the beginning of the 20th century. But the restaurant was the first international restaurant that wasn't a hotel in town. And what was very interesting was that people have this idea of Chiang Rai being a place in the middle of nowhere, not very developed or anything. But in fact, the families that lived there had very good connections. They were quite well-to-do. They just didn't show off their wealth. And most of their children went on to study elsewhere.
Really?
So many of the people who were my age or our age had gone off to study overseas. So when they came back home, they were really happy to have a little restaurant they could come into where they could get, you know, they
Spaghetti
could
and
get
coffee.
exactly, and steak, or you know, something like that. And so
Oh, so it began to draw these.
it brought together people who had been who had traveled, been well educated, and had friends, but were also resources for people who were doing research in the area. And they had friends, of course, across
Yeah.
across the societies in the associated towns,
Yeah.
like Chiang Mai or Nan, or you know, down to Bangkok
Yeah.
and elsewhere. So it became a center where people who were coming up to do research
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Chiang Rai would generally come and have a meal and get together, have a couple of drinks with old
Yeah.
friends.
I think they would stop off at my house for tea and then go up to your place for the weekend in Chiang Rai, because they all came through my house as well, right? But you ended up having fascinating people over the years. I mean,
Yes.
Chalerm Chai of the White Temple fame was a regular. Ajahn Nakhon, who founded the Mae Fa Luang Foundation, we'll talk about him later. Angkrit, the really famous artist, used to apparently go and sit in your gallery and just sort of get inspiration. It was the only place he saw real art in his life, he said once, right? And then you'd have Kun Wisha, who founded the Doi Chang Coffee. I hope you eventually switched to
Yes.
local coffee.
Yes.
And really, and you know, this, we used to visit. So you had some really fascinating people there. So did it feed into each other? How did it all change from people coming in and enjoying a meal into actually creating things and being,
Well, the wonderful thing about it was that it was a small place,
yeah.
and we tried to keep it friendly and not too, how can I say, sophisticated, so to speak.
I wouldn't have looked back and thought that. So no, you got that right.
And and so we became friends.
Yeah.
You know, not only did we get to know each other professionally, providing the service, but became friends. I became friends with a number of the people who came through, particularly P.V. Shah. I always think of him as my brother. And P.V. Shah and his family, and his daughter, Kim, was the same age as my daughter, May, and so
It's
they
the
were
Doi
good
Tang
friends.
Cafe guy.
Yes, and then from the art side, uh, because I was interested in the culture and also the ethnography of the area, and had some, how can I say, knowledge and background, Ajahn Nakhon had asked me to, you know, help volunteer in various projects that were going on, and
Yeah.
events at
Can you give us a brief about Ajahn Nakhon? I don't think everyone here knows him. Who is he? What's he done?
Ajahn Nakhon Pong Noi, very important person in the development of Chiang Rai. He worked with the, or still works with the Mae Fa Luang Foundation.
Yeah.
And but his background was in education, and he was very interested in developing the youth leadership program, particularly for students of gifted students who were wanting to continue their education, but also providing them them and other people a foundation for developing their ideas, creativity.
Well, I mean, it all started with, I don't know what to call her now, the mother of the previous king.
Yes, Somdet Ya.
Somdet Ya, yes.
The princess mother.
The princess mother. So she had this land, right, in Chiang Rai. Or how did she get involved?
Well, the Hill Area Foundation was the first establishment of what eventually became the Mae Fa Luang Foundation.
Right.
And a residence was necessary for the Chiang Rai office, and also for the dormitories for the students who were being supported in the youth leadership program.
Yeah.
So they had a small place in town, but then realized that they needed more space, and so funding was raised to, and then property was donated to them on the edge of town, and that's what eventually became what we call Rai Me Fa Luang.
Which, I mean, you've heard me reminisce many times, but in the 80s, actually, I've got a good quote from you here. Yeah, in the 70s, this is what Rebecca told me last time I talked to her. In the 70s, Jim Thompson and other foreigners began to become oh God, I can't read my own handwriting. Oh, sorry, let me start again. In the 70s, Jim Thompson and other foreigners began to become the custodian of Thai culture, and Thai people began to feel like they'd lost something. So, as the antique trade sucked artifacts out of the kingdom, Bangkokians took stock and began to appreciate all things Thai. And this kind of coincided with this period of time when Rai Me Fa Luang was being formed. And I remember in the 80s as a child, once a year, it would be the biggest event of the year. My mum's high-so friends from Bangkok and all the kun yings, they'd have their big hair, you know, all combed up. Yeah. And Wai Sa Me Fa Luang, and we used to all go up, glittery in gold and everything, into this sort of paddy field, and where they'd have these exquisite performances put on, cultural shows, and they were selling handicrafts. And it was like the first time, really, that Bangkok people got to see the richness of the culture outside of Ratanakosin, Bangkok. For me, I felt that way. And this was part of that movement, wasn't it?
That's right. Because the very first parade that I saw in Chiang Rai, everybody was dressed Western.
Ah.
Oh, yes. It was a parade that could have originated anywhere around the world except for Thailand.
Huh.
Because people were showing that they, how can I say, were modern, were developed. And so the people who were interested in particularly the local culture were very supportive of contributing to an evolution of the social framework.
So there was a
Because the social framework, there was a, yes, the social framework was focused upon showing that people in Chiang Rai were educated and developed rather than Thai per se. Because in a way, the more backwoods cultural style was still looked down upon socially. So they were showing that, in fact, they had mission hospital, they had the mission schools, and they sent their kids overseas to study. They were showing that they were of a certain class. And so, and then, of course, the studies that were being done by anthropologists of that time were focusing on traditional culture and giving value to it in a way that local people had not lost, but had put into a more private space. That private space became more public over time.
Yeah.
Because of course, people had been raised in a certain way. You know, they dressed certain ways, they had dressed certain ways, they had the knowledge, they had the culture, but they were not exhibiting it at that time. But when value was given to the culture itself, well, then they started exhibiting it, they started bringing it out, they started doing more research. Rajaput was being developed at that time, and Rajaput was also doing research into the cultural background in Chiang Rai. And working with not only foreign researchers, but also Thai researchers who were giving importance, assigning importance to preserving the local heritage.
Yeah, but how, I'm just curious, you know, how did it all come about? Like, because there's a very strong sense now of Chiang Rai culture, I feel, right? Yeah, look at you, so proud, you know it. So, I mean, how did, you know, because what you just said, it could be applied to many cities that were growing, you know, but how did this sort of combined shared vision and shared purpose come about?
So there was a network of connections that were very important. You had the connection with the temples, of course, and various rituals, but also the connection with the royal family. And when you spoke of the Ngam Wai Sa, what was very interesting was that to bring together a collection of important objects that eventually became the museum at Rai Me Fa Luang. Every Ngan Wai Sa not only had performances that focused on different legendary history of the area, but also there was a procession that was developed in each one of them where a certain object was contributed.
Oh.
And so in one year it would be donations of a kandok, a flower pedestal.
Yeah.
And or another one would be it would be kandok, another kind of kandok, or it would be a satapan, the candelabra
Oh.
that is in front of the Buddha images in
Oh,
northern
okay, I do know. Yeah.
in northern temples.
Yeah.
But the processions would focus on a particular type of object, or tung,
Tung,ใช่.
so each year had a different genre of objects
Yes.
would be focused upon
Yes.
and become part of the procession, the dance, the creation of the productions, and that's how the collection came together.
It was extraordinary. Just the sheer lineup of people that came alone and to see, to be inspired, to support.
And each year also celebrated the anniversary, the birth year of the Princess Mother.
Wow.
So one year it would be 85 objects, the next it would be 86 objects, the next it would be
okay.
87. And so each year a certain number of objects were donated by different participants in the procession that became part of the collection.
Wonderful. So give us a little bit of an overview of Lai Me Fa Luang, the Black House, the White Temple. What is the scene going on right now in Chiang Rai?
So all of these people were actually brought together by Ajahn Nakhon and participated in the various events that took place at Rai Me Fa Luang. But what was very interesting was that Tawan Dachani was an unusual man, as of course you know, who was quite independent in his artwork. He didn't work through galleries or anything like that. He marketed all of his own paintings.
He's, in case you don't know, very famous, recently deceased Chiang Rai artist who did very dramatic horns and red, white, black colors. He's got a house called Black House, and he's quite famous for sort of giving people a blank check and telling them to fill in how much they want to pay him for a painting. So he was probably one of the most successful artists in Thailand on the international stage, right?
And also, he and other artists were invited to participate in ways that they wanted to participate. In other words, they weren't told what to do.
Oh.
So creativity
CMU.
creativity was very much a part of what was developed at Rai Me Fa Luang. Even though it was quite well organized, obviously. I mean, these events had to be very well managed in a way. But it brought together not only the gifted students who were living there, who helped to organize everything.
And it gave them great futures.
That's right, and gave them very good connections. But it offered the artists an opportunity to be creative in what they did and the ways in which they participated. And as a result, it gave value to the artistic community and the cultural community in Chiang Rai in a way that was unique because it was a fairly small town.
Yeah.
I think you would realize that most art towns around the world are fairly small. And whereas when you get into a big city where you have universities, you have everybody else involved in it.
That's another quote
it's a completely
I've got
different
from you.
situation. Uh-oh.
As Rebecca said, in Chiang Mai, many artists are affiliated with Chiang Mai University. However, in Chiang Rai, they had to sell to survive, which forced them to create sellable art or to become theoretically advanced to receive international and overseas grants. That was a big difference, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So Chiang Rai artists worked in their own studios, and that's how we were friends. We would visit each other, eat together, come together for different purposes. And not only Ajahn Nakhon, but particularly Tawan Dachani brought together a group of artists a group of artists who called themselves Tai Yuan. And they were artists, painters, sculptors, performers who all came together. And we would come together every now and then at his home. And he also knew that I liked to write and I liked to write poetry, and he would invite me along too. So that's how I got to know and
Must be
to become friends.
Must
you
be
know,
so
with most of
inspiring
these
hanging
people.
out with those great, yeah, creative minds. So, which brings us to, so they stopped doing the Wai Sa Mei Fa Luang events, right? And it's sort of now known more as a museum, place of study. Am I right? Research center.
Well, there is a traditional, there is an event every year.
There is.
Yes, on the 18th of July,
Oh, okay.
every year in at Rai Me Fa Luang that commemorates the Princess Mother, and people are invited to come and participate and to make offerings, and so it it replaced the Ngan Wai Sa, which is mostly in January or February in the dry season and the winter season. This is one that is an annual event that people come to, local people for the most part.
Because it's not really I haven't heard of it. Yeah.
Well, there people who have been associated with Rai Me Fa Luang know of it and will travel up to
But it's not
join. But no, it's
big
not a
festival type thing.
nationally promoted event.
So what is it? So this brings us to your next phase in life. So when Rebecca turned 50 a couple years ago, she decided to go and study museology in the Netherlands, right? So now you've got a what degree in a what?
Well, the thing that was interesting to me in working with local people was the function of memory, and particularly the material aspect of memory. So what was happening, I opened the first art gallery in town,
Ahimsa
Gallery, and that is where I had the exhibition of Kunchalom Chai.
Oh,
A wonderful exhibition of work on Egypt, of all places. Oh,
really?
yes, not one Buddha image in the entire exhibition, and got to understand the relationship between creative production, particularly artistic production, and the local community, and how that worked into collections and exhibitions, et cetera, et cetera. So continuing as a volunteer with at Rai Me Fa Luang, now with Ajahn Khan, the project was developed to do a museum because of all of the donations that had been made of all of the different artifacts at the Rai, and the Hawk Ham was being built.
yeah.
And so the prospect of creating a museum in Chiang Rai was quite challenging, because of course everyone would say, well, Chiang Rai is in the middle of nowhere, why would we go and do something like that there?
Yeah.
But we received quite good support, and so the interest was, what kind of museum do we want to do?
Yeah.
So it was the philosophy of museology that interests me.
Oh.
And it wasn't being a curator or an art historian per se. It was understanding people's relationship to museology and collections, and sharing that information with the community.
So tell us about the philosophy behind, Me Fa Luang, and what you brought to it.
So the interesting aspect of particularly Rai Me Fa Luang was that you would have events that would become, you would have a generation of interest in a certain thing. So say, for instance, there would be an event with a certain subject or a certain genre. It would focus on something, and it would inspire people to create something new.
Can you give an example?
like for instance, an example would be, say, flower donations.
Okay.
You know, you have your kandok and you have to create flower arrangements.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
there's the traditional arrangements, but then you can be creative with those arrangements. And now, of course, we take it for granted that they're not all traditionally made. But in those days, when you saw a kandok,
It
you
had
would do
to,
the
yeah.
traditional arrangements. And yet this year, every year, with the documentation of the arrangements that people have been making,
Right.
there's been an incredible generation and evolution in the culture. So that was the basis of the principle that has always been at the center of the Rai,
Right.
is evolution and creation and generation.
Yeah.
And that is not to preserve something so that everybody copies
Yeah.
the old stuff.
Exactly.
In other words, it keeps the culture alive. And it preserves things that are worth preserving, that people are still interested in 50 years later, for instance.
There you go, which brings me to another thing that you said. Becca said in the last interview, I don't think of people like Ajahn Withi or Ajahn Nakorn as people who preserve the past, but as people who give meaning to the present so that we can evaluate where we want to go into the future.
That's correct.
Sage words.
That's correct.
From you. So, I mean, you've become more and more involved in this, taking from your museology roots, right? Just a few things that Rebecca does. I mean, I don't even know if I can cover all of them. Have you heard of the Informal Northern Thai group? It's a group that's been meeting for 5 years. The first meeting was actually at my house with my dad giving a talk on Northern Thai ceramics. And now it's held every month at the Alliance Francaise, and they always have some living here or passing through expert in something giving a talk. So Rebecca is one of the conveners of the group. She's also working with the Payap Lifelong Learning Center, setting up their library. She's also helping to set up a library, a museum with Payap, no, Prince Royal Payap.
Prince Mahidol.
Prince Mahidol.
With
I got it
McCormick
wrong.
Hospital, yes.
Tell us about that.
So the focus has been to give value to the past, thinking about how to move into the future. And so to begin with the Informal Northern Thai group, which you started with, the Informal Northern Thai group is very interesting because it's one of the few opportunities that local people have to come and listen to the work of the expert. Normally you have to be in academia. You have to be able to have access to the journals, be able to read all the different languages, etc., to learn about what they're doing. So there are many experts that come, they interview everybody, they get all the information, and then they disappear.
Yes.
And local people never see the results of what they're
makes it
doing.
accessible.
So the Informal Northern Thai group, started with your father, was to be able to share the work that was being done in a accessible presentation
With a glass of wine.
for local people. And that, everybody would be allowed to enter. You didn't have to sign up or register or anything
Isn't it 20
like
baht
that.
or something?
Right. We asked for a donation because, of course, we help the Alliance with the use of the facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So
But let's give it a plug. What is it, second Tuesday?
well, we went into suspended animation during the pandemic, but we will be starting again. So
it'll be on Citylife. I'll promote it. Information. But it's a highly, I mean, not that I go very often at all. I think the last one was like 3 years ago. But it's a really, really, really interesting evening out if you want to go and learn something and meet really interesting people. So that's one project down. Check.
And then I had moved over here after my husband had passed away.
Yeah.
And I had moved over here to Chiang Mai from Chiang Rai. Of course, I go back and forth, and we still have a property in Chiang Rai. But I was invited to advise on the Prince Mahidol Museum project.
Tell us a little bit about it.
That particular project is a historic house project that offers a perspective on the development of public health, particularly here in the north and in Chiang Mai, but also related to the country as a whole.
Yeah.
And it's gained tremendous interest since Thailand has been in the forefront of dealing with the latest pandemic. So the royal presence in the health field provided leadership and inspiration for Thai people working in the public health field, but also invited communities to become very much involved in the development of good public health standards.
How are you shaping
So
this museum?
the museum is in the house where Prince Mahidol resided when he was up here at McCormick Hospital. And the project is almost finished. We're just waiting for the official
I've
opening.
heard that a few times.
Yes, it's developed back and forth, but in its final development, it was very much supported by the Mahidol Museum. And so it's got wonderful video presentations of the history, and also you can see the actual place where he lived and learn about the history of the hospital.
Yeah.
And all of that was going on at that time.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah. And what else? There was something else.
And then lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning very much for me grew out of that, because we developed a group of friends of the museum for the Prince Mahidol Museum. And then a number of those people who joined the Friends also were very interested in including, along like the informal Northern Thai group, including local residents, whether Thai or foreign, living here in Chiang Mai, in education, non-formal education. In other words, just because you are no longer in college doesn't mean that you might not want to study.
Absolutely.
And so there have been a number of places that have been very supportive of this. You have the Alliance Française, a wonderful library. You also have the EFEO, the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, also another wonderful library that's provided us facilities for teaching and courses
Oh, I thought you did it all out in Hayat. Oh, I didn't realize.
And yes, and now we are developing a center, which will also have a library. And we are focusing on lectures and courses that, how can I say, share information on the culture, the history, the art, and then also other things that people might just happen to be interested in.
Yeah.
Natural history, we have birding excursions and excursions
to
to museums, and so it offers people an opportunity to study in a less formal way.
Yeah. And a lot of
about the region.
Retired expats here complain about how bored they are, nothing to do. Get off the bus stool and get into school.
Right, and it's an alternative to having to go on a tour.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
So you're coming together with people who actually live here, have an interest here. Many of them have a background here, and so you're creating a community that is giving value to the culture, both cultural and natural history of the area where they live.
Oh, next time there's something a bit fun, nothing too academic, please invite me. I'd like to come along and I can do a little report on it or something.
In fact, one of the upcoming very interesting things that we're having, we've had a number of lectures on national artists, and one of our upcoming excursions will be up to Suan Tun In.
Oh, yes,
the home of Rong Wong
Sawan. He was a bon vivant.
Yes. And I first met him at the Golden Triangle Cafe.
There we go. There we go. I probably did too, don't remember.
I was tending bar in the restaurant, and he came up and wanted a Jack Daniels.
Oh, same drink.
And then he looked over the bar and he said, "What are you reading? What are you writing?" And so we started talking about books and writing and everything, and of
I'd like
course,
to come on that one.
It's wonderful. It's upcoming. It's on the 20th of September.
Okay.
And it will also It will also celebrate the translation of one of his memoirs that he wrote about traveling in the United States, because he was sent to San Francisco as a journalist for Siam Rat.
Huh.
Yes, and so he knew that area around San Francisco, and he rode a bus around the United States, and he wrote about his experience. And that has just been published by White Lotus, that translation.
Excellent. Gosh, there's so,
So we'll
much
be
richness
celebrating
here.
that. We'll be celebrating
Yeah.
that. And we've had a couple of lectures at Informal Northern Thai Group
Yeah.
on his writing, sharing his writing, because his writing had not yet been translated into English.
I know that.
He was a very popular Thai writer, of course,
Of course, yeah.
but had not yet been translated.
Yeah.
So we have worked on the translation, and
Well,
it's
how's your
just been
book going?
published. Ah, yes.
Rebecca's been writing a book for a couple of
Interminably. Well, I think a memoir, by definition, is something that we work on for decades. So
right.
it's not a how can I say? It's a collection of chapters that I write about when I'm inspired by, how can I say, a time past. In other words, I've lived through something, I've experienced something, and then I write a chapter about it.
Excellent. Okay.
So I'm still writing.
Fair enough. Fair
Yes,
enough.
I'm still busy.
That would be something worth reading. But anything else you're working on?
Well, I've written many collections of poetry. Never been interested in, I don't know, I don't publish anything. I think it's partly because I just, it's kind of boring having to deal with.
Well, exactly. If I didn't publish my own stuff, no one else would. That's the way to go. Yeah.
So I've written a lot of collections of poetry, which of course I have, and I include some of it in my memoir, and now I'm working on a historical trilogy.
Ooh.
Yes. So everyone kept saying, well, your family background is so interesting, you know, looking at my husband's background from the both the French side, but also from the Northern Thai side, and then my parents' experiences out here. So I decided I would write a trilogy that would focus on this last century.
Ooh.
And so the first one, I've completed the first book, and volume 1, which is about great-grandfather, the one who brought coffee,
Yes, yes.
but also was involved in a number of, how can I say, controversial actions
Ooh.
during the time of the French colonialism,
Oh.
and the sinking of the ship in the Mekong with all of the Buddha images.
What, he sunk it?
No, he didn't. No. No. The belief, of course, is that the Payanak was protecting the images that were being taken to be off to France. So anyway,
interesting.
it's a very interesting
Yeah, that's kind of,
event.
Must
and
be,
so
yeah.
the second one focuses on grandfather and his experiences during the teak logging operation in Chiang Rai. And then the third one will be after World War II and the
Fascinating.
situation here.
So much to tell. Well, I think, I think we're going to have to wrap up soon.
I think so.
However, I just want to say, I'm going to go on a little rant now.
Uh-oh.
No. This is how you expat, right? This is how you do it. I mean, seriously, there's so much to get involved in Chiang Mai. If you put yourself out there, you walk the streets, you go and meet people, you just do it. I won't ever tolerate anyone saying they're bored living here. I just think that's absolute, sorry, but bollocks, you know? There's so much to do. There's Payap Lifelong Learning Center. There's IN Informal Northern Thai Group. There's museums to get involved in, libraries. If you're not academically minded, there's still really fun events. There's charities, there's foundations. This is how you expat. So there you go. Rebecca, any last words? Oh, no.
Well, to thank you for the opportunity, but my last word is that I think that the life is important. And the life that you live is related to where you live and who you live with. Not only your memories or where you came from or anything like that. And to have a relationship with the place in which you live, the people with whom you live,
Absolutely.
and to be able to offer what you can and to receive what you can. I have learned so much here. It has enriched my life tremendously.
Yeah.
And it has offered me an opportunity to give what I can give. And it's also taught me to smile.
There you go. Oh, and just a little bit, just to show off a little bit more. I mean, just in her spare time between all of that, Rebecca came and helped bring a team of volunteers to clean my dad's ceramics collection a few years ago. About 1,000 pieces. There they were, washing, cleaning,
Oh, it was an
sorting,
honor.
labeling. And then even today, she's come and looked at some of Dad's old books. I mean, so I don't know how you do it all, but I want to
it's
thank
an
you so
honor.
much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Map
Thank you.
And I'll definitely come to one of the pie up things. Too bad I'll miss the wrong one-to-one one. But thank you. สวัสดีเจ้า
สวัสดีเจ้า